The great hall floated in the darkness of space, orbiting a star that had seen billions of years pass. Inside, 12 species sat in a circle, each representing empires that stretched across thousands of worlds. This was the Galactic Council, and today they would decide the fate of a small blue planet called Earth. Taman stood in the center of the chamber, his human heart pounding as thousands of alien eyes watched him. He was the first of his kind to speak here, wearing a simple black suit that looked plain compared to the elaborate garments and biological features of the other species. Some had scales that shimmered like jewels. Others floated in containment fields, their bodies made of pure energy. A few were so large they had to attend through holographic projection. Honored members of the council, Taman began, his voice steady despite his nerves. I come before you representing the people of Earth. We have recently discovered faster-than-light communication, and we seek only peaceful contact with the greater galactic community. We wish to trade, to learn, and to contribute to the prosperity of all species. A low rumble came from the Vextari section. Chancellor Vextor rose from his seat, his reptilian body covered in dark green scales that looked like armor. His eyes were cold and calculating. The council recognizes the humans' request. However, we have concerns. Taman felt his stomach tighten. This was the moment he had feared. Vextor continued, his voice carrying authority that came from ruling hundreds of worlds. Earth's technological advancement has been remarkably rapid. In just 10,000 years, you have gone from primitive agriculture to quantum communication. This rate of progress is unusual. Some might say dangerous. We are curious and driven to improve ourselves, Taman replied carefully. Is that not admirable? It is concerning, another voice said. This came from a crystalline being who spoke through vibrations in the air. Your planet's history is filled with warfare. Your species has divided itself countless times and fought brutal conflicts. You have created weapons capable of destroying your own world. Taman took a breath. We have also created art, music, and literature. We have built cities and cured diseases. Yes, we have fought wars, but we have also made peace. We are learning and growing. Counselor Moralin, a being of light who represented one of the oldest species, spoke with a gentle voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The human speaks truth. All species go through difficult periods in their development. Perhaps we should give Earth time to prove their intentions. But Vextor was not satisfied. Time? They already occupy a star system rich in rare minerals. They sit at a strategic location between 3 major trade routes, and now they develop technology that could threaten established powers within a century. He turned to address the full council. I propose we place restrictions on Earth's expansion, limit their access to advanced technology, assign observers to monitor their development. If they truly seek peace, they will accept these reasonable precautions. Taman felt anger rising in his chest. You speak of reasonable precautions, but what you describe as occupation. You would make us prisoners in our own system. Better prisoners than conquerors, Vextor shot back. We have seen promising young species become threats before. The council exists to maintain order and peace. Sometimes that requires difficult decisions. The debate continued for hours. Some species supported Earth's freedom. Others sided with Vextor's caution. Many simply remained silent, unwilling to take a stand. Taman argued passionately, but he could feel the tide turning against him. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the council feared what humanity might become. Finally, the vote was called. The result was clear. Earth would face severe restrictions. They could not colonize beyond their own moon. They could not develop certain weapons technologies. Council observers would be stationed on Earth with authority to intervene if humans violated the terms. Trade would be limited and controlled. Taman stood in stunned silence. His mission had failed. Earth would be caged like a dangerous animal. Then the lights began to flicker. At first, it seemed like a technical malfunction. But the flickering grew more intense and a cold presence filled the chamber. Several council members cried out in alarm. Others activated defensive shields. The temperature dropped so suddenly that frost formed on metal surfaces. Something was manifesting in the center of the hall, right beside Taman. He stumbled backward, feeling power radiating from the space where nothing visible existed. But he could sense it. Everyone could. This was something ancient, something that had existed long before the council, before any of their civilizations. The entity took no physical form that eyes could properly see. It was there occupying space, but trying to look directly at it made Taman's mind hurt. Some council members described it later as a shadow that gave off light. Others said it looked like a hole in reality itself. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in everyone's mind, bypassing ears and language entirely. Do not provoke Earth. The voice carried weight that pressed down on everyone present. It was not a suggestion or advice. It was a warning from something that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Vextor recovered first, his military training helping him push through the fear. Who are you to interfere with council matters? We do not recognize your authority here. The entity turned its attention to the Chancellor. Though it had no eyes, everyone felt its gaze fall upon him. Vextor's scales went pale and he sat down abruptly. I am the Warden. I was old when your species first looked at the stars. I have seen what you have not. I know what you do not. I tell you now with clarity that cannot be misunderstood. Do not provoke Earth. Moralyn spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Why, what do you know about the humans? Everything, the Warden replied. And if you are wise, you will heed this warning. The restrictions you have placed will lead to war. War with humanity is not something your council can survive. Vextor tried to speak again, but no words came out. The entity was already fading, its presence withdrawing from the chamber. The lights returned to normal. The temperature rose. Within moments, it was as if nothing had happened, except for the ice still melting on the metal surfaces and the terror still visible on every face. Silence filled the hall for a long moment. Then chaos erupted. Council members shouted questions and demands. Some wanted to know who the Warden was. Others insisted the vote be reversed. A few, including Vextor, argued that the warning proved Earth was dangerous and justified even harsher restrictions. Taemin watched it all, his mind racing. The Warden had tried to protect Earth, but he feared it had only made things worse. Now the Council would see humanity as something mysterious and threatening. Now they would be even more afraid. As security escorted him from the chamber, Taemin looked back at the spot where the Warden had appeared. A single thought ran through his mind. What did that ancient being know about his species that even humans themselves did not know? He would send his report to Earth immediately. The Council had made their decision, and humanity would have to choose how to respond. But one thing was certain now. The galaxy had noticed Earth and nothing would ever be the same again. 6 months had passed since the Council's decision, and Earth had not been silent. Taemin stood in the United Earth Defense Committee's headquarters, deep beneath the surface of Geneva, watching screens that showed humanity's response to the galaxy's attempt to cage them. They thought they could keep us locked in our own system, General Hammond said, shaking his head. They don't understand us at all. Taemin had to agree. The Council's restrictions had done something they never expected. They had united humanity completely. Every nation, every faction, every group that had been arguing and competing suddenly had a common purpose. Earth would not be contained. On the main screen, a ship was launching from the orbital shipyard above Mars. It was the Indomitable, Earth's first deep space warship, and it was beautiful in a way that made Taemin's chest ache with pride. Sleek and deadly, covered in armor that absorbed sensor scans, armed with weapons that no Council species had thought to develop. Humanity had taken 5,000 years of warfare and condensed it into one vessel. Captain Jiwan reports ready for space trials, a technician announced. Good, the general replied. We'll need her ship soon enough. Taemin thought about Jiwan, the young woman who had been chosen to command humanity's most advanced warship. He had met her once, briefly. She was shorter than him, with sharp eyes that seemed to calculate angles and trajectories even in normal conversation. She had been a fighter pilot, then a tactical officer, and now she carried the hopes of 8 billion people on her shoulders. In another part of the complex, Dr. Hyunwoo was working in his laboratory, surrounded by equations that covered every wall. He had been obsessed with quantum mechanics since childhood, and now that obsession had paid off in ways the Council never anticipated. The quantum fold drive is stable, he told his assistant, a young woman named Park who looked exhausted from weeks of constant work. We can travel 3 times faster than any Council ship, and we did it without their technology or their permission. Park smiled tiredly. They said it would take us 200 years to understand quantum folding. You did it in 4 months. Hyunwoo shrugged. They think in terms of gradual progress. They advance slowly, carefully, building on established knowledge. Humans don't work that way. When we're pushed, we don't just adapt. We leap forward, he was right. Across Earth and its colonies on the Moon and Mars, similar breakthroughs were happening. New materials that were stronger and lighter than anything the Council used. Energy weapons that drew power from quantum fluctuations in space itself. Medical technology that extended human life and enhanced physical capabilities. Artificial intelligence that could predict enemy movements and devise countermeasures in microseconds. The Council had tried to stop human progress. Instead, they had turned it into an arms race that Earth was winning, but progress came with a price. Reports reached the Defense Committee that Vextor was mobilizing the Vextari Armada. 300 warships, some as large as cities, were gathering at the edge of Council space. Intelligence suggested they were preparing to enforce the restrictions by force. Taemin stood before the committee, delivering his assessment. Vextor sees our defiance as a personal insult. He's convinced the Council that we must be taught a lesson. If we back down now, we'll be slaves. If we fight, we might start a war that could destroy Earth. The defense minister, an older woman who had fought in the last major conflict on Earth, leaned forward. Ambassador, you've dealt with these aliens. Can we win? Taemin thought carefully before answering. The Vextari have numbers and experience. Their technology is mature and reliable, but they've been at peace for 300 years. Their tactics are old. Their commanders have never faced an enemy that fights the way we do. And how do we fight? She asked. Desperately. Taemin replied quietly. Humans have never had the luxury of easy wars. We've always been outnumbered or outgunned. We've learned to be creative, ruthless, and unpredictable. The Vextari fight by rules. We fight to win. The committee voted unanimously. Earth would not surrender. They would defend their freedom, whatever the cost. Captain Jiwon received her orders 3 days later. Take the Indomitable and 11 other ships. Intercept the Vextari Armada before it reaches the Sol system. Buy time for Earth's defenses to prepare. 12 ships against 300. The odds were impossible. Jiwon gathered her crew in the hangar bay before departure. They were young, most of them. The oldest was barely 35, but their eyes held determination that came from knowing what they were defending. I won't lie to you, she told them, her voice carrying through the vast space. The mission ahead is dangerous. We're outnumbered 25-1. The Council thinks we're primitives who got lucky with some technology. They think we'll run or surrender when we see their fleet. She paused, looking at each face. They're wrong. We're not fighting because we're strong. We're fighting because we have no choice. Behind us is Earth, our families, our homes, everything we love. And no one, not the Council, not the Vextari, not anyone in this galaxy will take that from us without a fight they'll never forget. The crew erupted in cheers. They knew the odds. They knew many of them might not come home. But they also knew they were making history. Commander Sora, Jiwon's second in command, approached her after the briefing. Sora was a tactical genius who had graduated top of her class in every military academy on Earth. She had spent the last 6 months studying every known battle the Vextari had fought, looking for patterns and weaknesses. I've been analyzing their fleet formations, Sora said, pulling up holographic displays. They favor overwhelming firepower and direct assault. They've never had to deal with guerrilla tactics or asymmetric warfare. They don't expect deception because they consider it dishonorable. Jiwon smiled grimly. Then we'll teach them that honor is a luxury. In war, you use every advantage you can find. The 12 ships launched from Earth orbit in a sight that was broadcast across every screen on the planet. Humanity held its breath as their defenders headed into the darkness of space, toward an enemy that outnumbered them so badly that victory seemed impossible. But those watching didn't know what Jiwon and her crew knew. They didn't know about the weapon systems that violated every convention of civilized warfare. They didn't know about the tactical doctrines developed from 5,000 years of human conflict. They didn't know about the quantum computers running millions of battle simulations, learning and adapting with each iteration. Most importantly, the Vextari didn't know about the human capacity for innovation in the face of certain death. Throughout history, whenever humans had been backed into a corner with no hope of survival, they had found ways to win that no one thought possible. As the Indomitable entered quantum fold space, leaving Earth behind, Jiwon stood on the bridge and thought about the Warden's warning. That ancient entity had told the Council not to provoke Earth. Soon Vextor would learn why. The journey to Proxima Centauri would take 3 days. 3 days to prepare for a battle that would determine whether humanity remained free or became slaves to the Council's fear. 3 days before the galaxy learned what humans were truly capable of when their survival was on the line. In his laboratory, Dr. Hyunwoo continued working on improvements to the quantum drive, knowing that every edge mattered. In Geneva, Taemin coordinated with Earth's remaining defenses, preparing for the worst. Across the planet, 8 billion people went about their lives, trying not to think about the fleet of warships heading toward their protectors. And in the darkness between stars, the Vextari Armada advanced, confident in their power, unaware that they were about to collide with a species that had spent its entire existence learning one lesson above all others. Survival is not negotiable. The Vextari Armada emerged from quantum space near Proxima Centauri in a display of overwhelming power. 300 warships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of the red dwarf star. Each vessel was massive, carrying enough firepower to level a city. Together they represented the might of an empire that had conquered 200 worlds. Chancellor Vextor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominance, watching tactical displays with satisfaction. His scales reflected the soft glow of the screens as he reviewed the formations. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Any sign of the human fleet? He asked his sensor officer. Negative, Chancellor. The system appears empty except for a few automated mining stations. Vextor's eyes narrowed. They knew we were coming. Intelligence confirmed they launched 12 ships 3 days ago. Where are they? Perhaps they fled, his second officer suggested. Faced with our superior numbers, retreat would be logical. Humans don't seem to value logic, Vextor muttered. The warden's warning still bothered him, though he would never admit it aloud. He had spent months investigating that ancient entity, but found nothing useful. Just legends and fragmented records from dead civilizations. Whatever the warden was, it had no authority here. This was council business, and the council had authorized this action. On the Indomitable, hidden in the shadow of a large asteroid on the system's edge, Captain Jiwon watched the Vextari fleet with cold calculation. Her ship's stealth systems kept them invisible to the enemy's sensors, but she could see everything they did. 300 ships, Commander Sora said quietly, standing beside her, arranged in standard battle formation. Heavy cruisers at the center, destroyers on the flanks, carriers in the rear. Textbook formation. Predictable, Jiwon replied. They're so confident in their numbers that they're not even being cautious. Sora, execute Phase 1. Sora's fingers flew across her console, sending the signal now. Throughout the Proxima system, automated drones that had been placed weeks ago suddenly came to life. They were small, barely larger than a human fist, and their energy signatures were almost identical to the mining stations the Vextari had already dismissed as harmless. But each drone carried a payload that would teach the Vextari their first lesson. The drones accelerated to a fraction of light speed and struck. Kinetic weapons were considered primitive by council standards. Why throw rocks when you had energy weapons and missiles? But humans had learned long ago that sometimes the simplest weapons were the most effective. A small object moving at relativistic speeds carried energy equivalent to a nuclear bomb, and there was no defense that could stop them all. The Vextari fleet's shields absorbed the first impacts, but there were hundreds of drones, each programmed to target specific weak points that Sora had identified from her analysis. Ships began reporting damage. Shields failed. Hull breaches opened to space. The perfect formation broke apart as commanders tried to respond to threats coming from every direction. What are they firing at us? Vextor demanded, gripping his command chair as the Dominant shuddered from an impact. Kinetic projectiles, Chancellor, moving at 0.3 light speed. Our shields aren't designed to handle this volume of impacts. Kinetic weapons? Vextor felt insulted. Respond with full firepower. Destroy anything that moves. The Vextari fleet opened fire, energy beams and missiles filling the space around them. They destroyed dozens of drones, but it was like trying to swat flies with a hammer. The small targets were too numerous and too fast, and while they were distracted, the real attack began. The 12 human ships dropped their stealth and accelerated from 3 different directions. They moved faster than Vextari sensors expected, their quantum drives allowing them to make impossible maneuvers. The Indomitable led the charge, Jiwon's voice calm as she issued orders. All ships execute Pattern Alpha 7. Target their carrier group. Nuclear weapons free. The human ships unleashed hell. Nuclear-pumped X-ray lasers were another weapon the Council considered crude and outdated, but humans had refined them to devastating effect. Each warhead, when detonated, channeled its energy through specialized rods that converted the blast into focused beams of radiation. One explosion could strike dozens of targets simultaneously. The Vextari carriers, designed to operate safely behind the main battle line, suddenly found themselves under attack from weapons their shields couldn't fully stop. Radiation burned through their hulls. Internal systems failed. Thousands of Vextari crew members died in seconds. Carrier groups 3 and 5 are destroyed, Sora reported. 6 is heavily damaged and withdrawing. All ships break and scatter, Jiwan commanded. Execute evasion pattern Delta. Make them chase you. The human fleet split up, each ship racing in a different direction. The Vextari fleet, now thoroughly enraged, abandoned their formation entirely and gave chase. This was exactly what Sora had predicted they would do. Vextor watched in growing fury as his fleet pursued the human ships. How are they so fast? Their ships are smaller than ours. They shouldn't be able to outrun us. Their drive technology appears more advanced than our intelligence suggested, his science officer reported nervously. And Chancellor, I'm detecting something else. Autonomous combat drones. Thousands of them. They were hiding in the debris field left by our destroyed carriers. The next wave struck before Vexitor could respond. AI-guided drones swarmed the Vextari fleet like angry insects. Each drone was programmed with centuries of human aerial combat tactics, adapted for space warfare. They didn't just attack randomly. They coordinated, working together to overwhelm point defenses and strike at vulnerable systems. More Vextari ships took damage. Some lost propulsion and drifted helplessly. Others had their weapons disabled. A few suffered catastrophic failures and exploded. This is madness, Vextor hissed. How are 12 ships doing this to us? Commander Sora, monitoring the battle from the Indomitable, allowed herself a small smile. The Vextari were fighting exactly as she had predicted. They were powerful but inflexible, trained for set-piece battles against enemies who fought the same way. They had no experience with an enemy that used deception, hit-and-run tactics, and weapons that violated their sense of proper warfare. Chancellor, one of his officers reported, we've damaged 2 human ships. They're falling behind their formation. Finally, Vextor growled. All ships in that sector converge and destroy them. 50 Vextari ships changed course, moving to overwhelm the damaged human vessels. It seemed like the logical move. Eliminate the weak ships. Reduce the enemy's numbers, begin to turn the tide. It was a trap. The damaged ships weren't actually damaged. They had been broadcasting false signals, making themselves look vulnerable. When the Vextari ships converged, they found themselves in a kill zone. The 2 ships suddenly accelerated, revealing they had been feigning damage while the rest of the human fleet circled back and caught the Vextari force from behind. The battle that followed was brutal. At close range, human weapons proved devastating. Plasma cannons that burned through Vextari armor. Missiles that carried warheads designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in Council shield technology. And psychological warfare tactics transmitted on open channels, designed to create confusion and fear among enemy crews who had never experienced real combat. Retreat, Vextor finally ordered, the word tasting like poison in his mouth. All ships withdraw to rally point Beta. The Vextari fleet disengaged, using their numbers to create a fighting retreat. The human ships harried them but didn't press too hard. Jiwan knew better than to overextend when they had already achieved their objective. When the Vextari finally escaped to quantum space, Vextor surveyed the damage with disbelief. 80 ships lost, 80 out of 300. Against 12 human vessels. Damage report on the human fleet? He asked quietly. All 12 ships survived, Chancellor. Several took damage, but all are still combat effective. Vextor sat in his command chair, staring at the empty space where the battle had occurred. The warden's warning echoed in his mind. Do not provoke Earth. He had thought he understood power. The Vextari Empire had crushed countless enemies, but what he had witnessed today wasn't just superior technology. It was a completely different philosophy of warfare. The humans fought like they had been doing it for their entire existence, refining every tactic, exploiting every weakness, using weapons and strategies that Council species considered beneath them. Send a message to the Council, Vextor said finally. Tell them we need to discuss new terms. On the Indomitable, G1 watched the Vextari fleet flee. Her crew was cheering, celebrating their impossible victory. But she felt no joy. This battle was just the beginning. Sora, compile all battle data and transmit it to Earth. Every tactic, every weapon system, every vulnerability we discovered. Others need to learn from this. Already done, Captain, Sora replied. G1 nodded and looked at the view screen showing the direction of Earth, 37 light-years away. They had won today, but the real question remained unanswered. Would the Council accept this defeat and negotiate peace, or would they see it as humiliation that demanded revenge? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. Counselor Moralyn felt troubled as she traveled through quantum space toward her homeworld. The Battle of Proxima had sent shockwaves through the entire Galactic Council. Battle recordings had been analyzed by every species' military experts, and the conclusions were all the same. Humanity fought in ways no council race had ever encountered. But Moralyn's concern went deeper than military tactics. She kept thinking about the Warden's warning and the fear she had felt when that ancient entity manifested. The Warden had known something, had tried to warn them, and they had ignored it. Now Vextor's armada had paid the price, but she suspected the cost could become much higher if they didn't understand what they were dealing with. Her homeworld, Luminos, was a planet of crystalline structures and gardens of light. The Luminari were one of the oldest species in the Council, existing for over 1,000,000 years. They prided themselves on wisdom and knowledge, maintaining the great archives that contained records from hundreds of civilizations across the ages. Moralyn made her way to the archives, a vast complex that stretched deep into the planet's crust. Most of the knowledge was stored digitally, but the oldest records existed in physical form, written in languages that predated modern civilization. The head archivist met her at the entrance. "Counselor, we received your message. You wish to research the entity called the Warden?" "Yes," Moralyn replied. "I need to understand what it knows about humanity. There must be records, even fragmentary ones. The Warden claimed to be ancient. If it exists in our records at all, it would be in the deepest archives." The archivist, an old Luminari who had spent 300 years tending these records, nodded slowly. "There are mentions, yes. Brief references in texts from extinct civilizations. Most dismiss them as myths or religious concepts, but if you wish to search, I can guide you to the relevant sections." They descended into the depths of the archives, passing through chambers filled with knowledge from species that no longer existed. Moralyn felt the weight of history pressing down on her as they went deeper, reaching levels that few ever visited. In one of the deepest chambers, they found scrolls written by the Precursors, the civilization that was believed to be the first to achieve interstellar travel. The scrolls were 50,000 years old, preserved through technology that even the Luminari no longer fully understood. As Moralyn began reading, she found her hands trembling. The Precursors had been confident, arrogant even. They saw themselves as the shepherds of younger species, guiding them toward civilization and enlightenment, and they had found a promising young species on a world they called the Blue Pearl. The early reports were optimistic. The species showed intelligence and curiosity. The Precursors decided to make contact, to guide their development carefully. But something went wrong. The species, humans they were called even then, didn't respond to guidance the way the Precursors expected. They asked too many questions. They challenged Precursor authority. When the Precursors tried to establish rules and restrictions, the humans became angry and defiant. Moralyn continued reading, her concern growing with each passage. The Precursors had decided that humans were too dangerous to be allowed complete freedom. They imposed controls, limited human access to certain technologies, restricted their expansion beyond their homeworld. It was the same mistake the Council had just made. The scrolls described what happened next in stark, frightened terms. Humans didn't accept the restrictions. They found ways around every limitation. When the Precursors tried to enforce their rules more strictly, humans fought back. And they didn't fight fairly or honorably. They used deception, sabotage, guerrilla tactics, and weapons that the Precursors considered barbaric. The war lasted 3 generations. At first, the Precursors were confident in their superiority. They had been spacefaring for thousands of years. Humans had barely left their own planet, but humans learned fast, adapted faster, and refused to surrender even when defeat seemed certain. One scroll described a battle where a single human ship, badly damaged and outgunned, rammed itself into a precursor space station rather than retreat. The station had been destroyed, along with its crew and facilities. The precursors had been shocked. Who would sacrifice themselves so completely? Another scroll told of a human military leader who had said something that the precursors found chilling. "We are not fighting to win. We are fighting so that defeating us costs more than you're willing to pay." That strategy had worked. The precursors poured resources into controlling Earth, but humans made every victory expensive. They poisoned planets the precursors tried to colonize. They destroyed supply lines. They created weapons of such cruelty that the precursors hesitated to describe them in detail, and they never stopped learning. Every tactic the precursors used against them, humans analyzed and found counters for. Every weapon the precursors deployed, humans either stole or created better versions of. The final scrolls were desperate and frightened. The precursor civilization was collapsing, not from losing battles but from exhaustion. The war with humanity had drained their economy, their population, their will to continue. Meanwhile, humans seemed to have endless determination. In the end, the precursors had created the Warden, an artificial intelligence designed to survive after they were gone. Its purpose was simple: warn future civilizations about Earth, tell them to leave humanity alone, to let them develop naturally, to never try to control or threaten them. Then the precursors had withdrawn from the galaxy entirely. Some scrolls suggested they fled to another dimension. Others hinted at mass suicide. Whatever happened, they vanished completely, leaving behind only ruins and warnings. Moralyn set down the last scroll with shaking hands. The implications were staggering. Humans hadn't suddenly become dangerous. They had always been this way. For 50,000 years, they had carried the same traits that had destroyed the precursors: adaptability, determination, and a refusal to accept defeat. "Counselor?" Moralyn turned to find someone else had entered the chamber. A young woman, human, wearing the simple robes of an archive scholar. Moralyn recognized her. Yunji, one of the handful of humans who had been allowed to study at the Great Archives before the Council's restrictions. "You've been reading about the precursors," Yunji said quietly, approaching the scrolls. "About what they tried to do to my people. You knew about this?" Moralyn asked. "Suspected. I've been researching human history, trying to understand why we are the way we are. I found references to a period our legends call the time of fire from the sky. Stories about gods who came from space and tried to rule us. We fought them and won." Yunji smiled sadly. "I thought they were just myths until I started studying here and found these records. Your species destroyed the most advanced civilization in the galaxy," Moralyn said, still processing what she had read. "And you don't even remember it." "We remember the lesson," Yunji replied, running her fingers along one of the ancient scrolls. "Every culture on Earth has stories about defying tyranny, about fighting against impossible odds, about refusing to surrender even when defeat seems certain. We remember it in our bones even if we forgot the specific events." "The Warden tried to warn us," Moralyn said. "We should have listened." Yunji looked at the counselor with eyes that held sadness and understanding. "You couldn't have known. How could you? The precursors hid what happened because they were ashamed. They were supposed to be the wise shepherds of younger species, and instead they were defeated by primitives who barely understood space travel." "What happens now?" Moralyn asked. "Your people defeated Vextor's fleet. The council is divided. Some want revenge, others want peace. But all of us are afraid. Fear is understandable," Yunji said, "but it's also dangerous. Fear led the precursors to try controlling us. Fear led the council to impose restrictions. Fear led Vextor to attack. Every time someone acts from fear of what humans might do, they create the very conflict they were trying to avoid. Then what should we do?" Yunji thought for a moment before answering. "Treat us as equals. Not as children to be guided, not as threats to be contained, but as partners who can contribute to the galaxy's prosperity. Humans don't want to conquer or dominate. We just want the freedom to grow and explore. Give us that and we'll be the best allies you could ask for. Try to cage us and history will repeat itself." Moralyn absorbed these words, understanding their truth. She looked at the ancient scrolls, at the warnings the precursors had left behind. The Galactic Council stood at a crossroads. They could learn from the past and choose peace, or they could repeat the precursors' mistakes and face the same fate. I need to return to the council, Moralyn said. These records must be shared with all members. They need to understand what we're dealing with. Will it make a difference? Yunji asked. Will they listen? I don't know, Moralyn admitted. But I have to try. The alternative is unthinkable. As they left the chamber, Moralyn glanced back at the precursor scrolls. 50,000 years had passed since those words were written, since a civilization had learned the hard way that humanity could not be controlled. The warning had been preserved all this time, waiting for someone to find it and understand its meaning. She only hoped the council would prove wiser than the precursors had been. Because the alternative was not just defeat, but the possible extinction of everyone who opposed Earth. And based on what she had read, humans would regret that outcome, would feel sorrow for the lives lost, but they would not hesitate to do what was necessary to protect their freedom. That was what made them truly dangerous. Not their weapons or tactics, but their absolute unwillingness to accept subjugation, no matter the cost. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the most tense gathering in its 3,000-year history. Every species had sent their highest representatives, and the chamber buzzed with dozens of languages as members argued among themselves before the official proceedings began. Taimin stood in the waiting area, adjusting his suit one more time. This time he wasn't alone. Captain Jiwan stood beside him in her military uniform, decorations from the Battle of Proxima gleaming on her chest. Behind them were 3 more humans, Dr. Hyunwoo, Commander Sora, and a military analyst named Minho, who had compiled the full report on Earth's defensive capabilities. Nervous? Jiwan asked quietly. Terrified, Taimin admitted. Everything depends on what happens in the next few hours. Either we achieve peace or we prepare for a war that could destroy us all. We won't be destroyed, Jiwan said with quiet confidence. I've seen what humanity can do when survival is on the line. If they force us to fight, we'll make sure they regret it. That's what worries me, Taimin replied. Victory through mutual destruction isn't really victory. The chamber doors opened and they were summoned inside. The scene was different from Taimin's first visit 6 months ago. Then the council had looked at him with curiosity and condescension. Now the alien faces showed fear, anger, and uncertainty. Counselor Moralyn spoke first, her voice calm but carrying authority. This emergency session has been called to address the current crisis with Earth. The Battle of Proxima has demonstrated that our initial approach was flawed. Before we proceed, Counselor Moralyn has information that all members must hear. Holographic displays activated around the chamber, showing images of ancient scrolls and translated text. Moralyn described what she had found in the Great Archives, the history of the precursors and their failed attempt to control humanity. The chamber fell silent as she spoke. Some council members had heard legends about the precursors but dismissed them as myths. Now faced with documented evidence and the clear parallel to their current situation, they couldn't ignore the truth. The precursors were the most advanced civilization in galactic history, Moralyn continued, and humanity defeated them, not through superior technology, but through superior determination. They refused to accept defeat, adapted to every challenge, and made the cost of victory too high for their enemy to bear. Chancellor Vextor, his scales still showing the stress of his defeat, rose from his seat. His voice was bitter but controlled. So you're saying we should surrender? Accept that these primitives can dictate terms to civilizations that have existed for millions of years? I'm saying we should learn from history, Moralyn replied. The precursors tried to control Earth and were destroyed. We tried to restrict Earth and lost 80 ships in a single battle. Perhaps the pattern is clear enough that we should try a different approach. Another council member, a insectoid being called Crixtal, spoke up. What approach do you suggest? Allowing them unlimited freedom? They could become a threat to every species in the galaxy. Taimin stepped forward, his voice steady despite the hostile attention suddenly focused on him. With respect, Counselor, we already are a threat, not because we want to be, but because you made us one. Every restriction you imposed, we overcame. Every weapon you thought we couldn't build, we built better. You treated us like children who needed to be controlled. And you created an enemy where you could have had a friend. Bold words from someone whose planet we could destroy. Vextor growled. Jiwan spoke for the first time, her voice cold and hard. You could try, But let me explain what would happen. Earth has defensive systems you haven't seen yet. Orbital weapons platforms, automated defense networks, and weapon systems that we deliberately didn't use at Proxima, because we hope to avoid total war. If you attack Earth directly, yes, you might destroy us, but the cost would be catastrophic. She activated her own holographic display, showing tactical analyses that made several council members recoil. We've analyzed your fleet compositions, your tactics, your logistics. We know where your homeworlds are, where your supply lines run, where your weaknesses lie. If you force us into total war, we will fight with everything we have. And we will target not just your military, but your entire civilization's ability to continue fighting. That's terrorism. Someone shouted from the council floor. That's war, Jiwon replied flatly. The kind of war humanity has been fighting for 10,000 years. We don't have the luxury of limited engagements and honorable defeats. When we fight to win or make sure our enemy wishes they had never started the conflict. Dr. Hyunwoo stepped forward, his voice calmer, but no less serious. But we don't want war. I'm a scientist, not a soldier. I develop technology to help humanity grow and explore, not to destroy other species. Most humans feel the same way. We want to trade, to learn, to contribute to the galactic community. The weapons and tactics you saw at Proxima, those are our last resort, not our first choice, Commander Sora added, but we will use them if we must. That's the message you need to understand. Humanity can be your greatest ally or your worst nightmare. The choice is yours. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species supported finding a peaceful solution. Others, humiliated by the defeat at Proxima, demanded continued conflict. The debate raged for hours, with Taemin and his team answering questions and addressing concerns. Finally, Morlin called for order. We can argue endlessly, or we can make a decision. I propose a new treaty. Earth becomes a full member of the Galactic Council with all rights and protections. All restrictions are lifted. In exchange, Earth agrees to share its technological advances and military doctrines with the Council, so we can all benefit from their innovations. You want to reward their aggression? Vextor demanded. I want to avoid the extinction of Council civilization, Morlin replied sharply. Because that is what will happen if this conflict continues. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually. The precursors learned that lesson. I would prefer we not have to learn it the same way. A long silence followed. Then slowly species began indicating their support for the proposal. Not all of them, but enough to create momentum. Even some of Vextor's allies abandoned him, recognizing that continued conflict served no one's interests. The vote was called. When the results appeared, Taemin felt his knees go weak with relief. The motion passed. Earth would join the Council as a full member. Vextor stood, his posture rigid with suppressed rage. This is a mistake that the Council will regret. Mark my words, humanity will use this opportunity to dominate us all. Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered. Not again, Taemin thought, recognizing what was happening. The warden was returning. The ancient entity manifested in the center of the chamber, just as it had 6 months ago. Its presence was overwhelming, pressing down on everyone with the weight of ages. When it spoke, its words appeared in every mind simultaneously. Humanity was forged in fire. Their world was harsh, their evolution brutal, their history filled with conflict. They survived ice ages, plagues, wars, natural disasters that would have destroyed softer species. They are what every species would become if forced to endure what Earth's environment demanded. The warden's attention turned to Vexator. You feared them because they reflect what you have forgotten. That civilization is not weakness. That peace is not surrender. That sometimes the greatest strength is the will to survive against impossible odds. Then it addressed the full council. The precursors tried to control humanity because they saw them as dangerous children. But humans were never children. They were survivors who learned every lesson their world could teach. Treat them with respect, and they will be loyal allies who bring innovation and determination to every challenge. Provoke them, try to dominate them, and you will discover why the precursors no longer exist. The entity began to fade, but its final words echoed through the chamber. This is my last warning. The choice you made today was wise. Do not unmake it through fear or pride. The galaxy is vast, filled with mysteries and threats you have not yet encountered. Humanity can help you face those challenges, or they can become the greatest challenge you ever face. Choose wisely. Then it was gone, leaving behind silence and stunned faces. After a long moment, the Council formally accepted the treaty. Taman signed on behalf of Earth, his hand steady despite the emotions churning inside him. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had earned its place among the stars. As the session ended and delegations began to leave, Jiwan approached Vextor, who stood alone, watching the humans with an expression that mixed resentment and grudging respect. "Chancellor," she said quietly, "I know you see this as a defeat, but it doesn't have to be. Humanity has no interest in revenge or domination. We just want the freedom to grow. In time, you might find that we make better friends than enemies." Vextor looked at her for a long moment. The warden was right about one thing. You are what we have forgotten. Perhaps that is worth learning from. He paused, then added, "But don't expect me to like it." Jiwan smiled slightly. "I don't expect you to like it. I just expect you to respect it." 3 months later, the first human embassy opened on the council station. Trade agreements were signed. Technology exchanges began. Human scientists worked alongside alien researchers on projects that benefited everyone. Human military advisors, including Commander Sora, taught council forces new tactics and strategies. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still species that viewed humanity with suspicion, but the alternative had been war, and everyone had seen what human warfare looked like. Peace was better. Taman stood in his new office as Earth's permanent ambassador to the Council, looking out at the stars. Captain Jiwan visited him, taking a break from her duties as Fleet Admiral. "Do you think it will last?" she asked, echoing Sora's question from months ago. "The peace?" Taman thought carefully before answering. "As long as they remember the cost of breaking it. As long as they see us as partners rather than threats. As long as we prove that humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons or our tactics, but our ability to cooperate and build when given the chance. And if they forget?" Taman smiled grimly. "Then we remind them, not with threats or aggression, but by being exactly what the warden said we are. Survivors who refuse to quit. Innovators who find solutions to impossible problems. Defenders who protect what we love with everything we have." Jiwan nodded, satisfied with that answer. She looked out at the stars too, at the galaxy that humanity was now part of. You know what the funny thing is? We spent thousands of years looking at the stars and wondering if we were alone. Now we know we're not, and we discovered that we're the scary ones. "Maybe that's appropriate," Taman replied. "Humans have always been survivors. We survived our own planet, our own conflicts, our own worst impulses. If that makes us scary to species who had easier paths, so be it. Better to be feared and respected than dismissed and controlled." They stood together in comfortable silence, two humans who had helped shape their species' first steps into the galactic community. The future was uncertain, as futures always are, but for the first time in human history, it was a future among the stars, with all the possibilities that implied. And if any civilization ever forgot the lessons of the precursors, if anyone ever again tried to provoke Earth, well, humanity would be ready. They always had been. That was what it meant to be human, to face impossible odds and find a way to survive, adapt, and ultimately triumph. The galaxy would learn to live with that reality, one way or another.